Alrighty,
Here we are.
here we go.
Yeah,
All right, Hunter, how you doing?
I'm fantastic.
Good.
This is kind of a big deal for you.
Yeah,
Your
Yeah.
first podcast episode ever.
thank you so much for coming on. You have no idea how much I appreciate
Oh,
it.
it's my pleasure. This
Yeah.
is, I mean, you had already told me quite a bit about this before we started rolling, but
Yeah.
do you want to start? Do you want to tell me about why a podcast?
Yeah,
Why do this? Why have
well,
someone like me
let
here?
me start before that by saying how we met, which was at an IDW meetup,
That's right.
meetup.com, which, I think we have similar interests. And I was super engaged when we met. Like, you're a therapist, so big time. I love therapy, love psychology, love the whole field. So if we end up just talking about therapy for 2 hours, that's awesome.
That's right. No,
Totally
I
cool.
would have no problem with that.
And this can be a therapy session for me. Like, ask me.
We'll see
like
about
I was
that.
saying.
I'll bill you afterwards.
Yeah. The reason I started this is, I had a transformation. I'm one of the guys that, it sounds maybe cheesy, it sounds cliche, but Jordan Peterson really did save my life. I had a rough time, moved out to LA by myself, and just went down not a great path, just not responsible. I have a daughter and was not being a good father, wasn't taking on the responsibility of that, wasn't a good partner. A lot of that just, I can't blame my past, but a lot of that is just from not understanding what discipline is, not understanding how to be disciplined, not understanding how to be responsible, not really thinking that's even a meaningful thing.
Yeah.
It's like what Jordan Peterson talks about, like, how do you live a meaningful life? Take on responsibility. And it's hard, at least in my generation, we're about the same age. I grew up with a lot of, pursue happiness. It's, being a lot of my friends, a lot of the community that I was in, football, kind of the people that I hung around with were not, it wasn't about responsibility. It was more about, let's party after football practice. Let's go drink. Let's chase drugs. Let's chase girls, whatever it was. So I guess, I definitely didn't understand responsibility, discipline at all. I had my moments in high school where I was doing it unconsciously in football, weight training, but actually intellectually understanding it, it wasn't there. So
It helped me a lot when, again, if you don't mind my mentioning, but you weren't being hyperbolic when you said that your life was literally saved.
Yeah,
Do you mind saying what that amounted to?
For sure. Like, thank you for asking. So I had a rough few years when I moved out here. Everything was going sour, and I went down the path of blaming everyone else, not taking responsibility, and becoming very nihilistic and becoming atheist in a bad way. You know what I mean? Like, I'm nothing against atheism. I have nothing against any of that, but it was a way for me to, I guess, negate values, to think that nothing matters. There isn't a God. Nothing is meaningful. Like, we're just these organisms and none of it matters. And I went down that path, and it all accumulated in this studio here. Over there, that closet, I had a belt around my neck, tied it to the door, and was really there, wanting to commit suicide. It was there, and it was an extremely low, pathetic place, but it was one of the most powerful experiences I've had, because it was, for the lack of a better way to say it, like a religious experience, because I didn't do it. And even now, I don't fully understand why. Like, I thought about my daughter. I thought about my family. I thought about my responsibilities, but none of it was enough. I was still trying to do it. And, what kept me from doing it, I guess, you can help me understand it possibly, is like the thought that I have potential in me that I can fulfill. It's hard, and it's not easy, and it's dreadful pushing yourself to uncomfortable places, but I felt like there's potential in me that if I die now, it is going to go to waste. And I feel like that for everybody. That's part of this podcast, is I feel like everybody has that potential. I really believe that. Everyone has this vivid, complex life. We talked about the phrase Sonder. I think it's such an interesting idea to see people as complex, vivid, other humans that have lived just a life that you can't possibly know the stuff that someone else has experienced, the emotions, the thoughts. And so I believe that. I think everyone has this potential, and it's sad. I'm with Jordan Peterson on like, it is sad to see a lot of nihilistic people, young men, and that's what I've experienced too. A lot of my friends back from high school are kind of, they're just not feeling like they have purpose. I can see it in them. I can see them going down the traditional path, letting go of the dreams they had, musicians kind of giving up on wanting to play the music, and just losing this feeling that we have this potential in us, that if we just got to push ourselves to somehow reach whatever it is in your mind. It's relative, everyone's different, but I think that's what kept me from committing suicide. And that was after Jordan Peterson. Came across Jordan Peterson, and then for like a year was in and out of depression, anxiety, struggling, listening to his ideas, and at some moments feeling worse because now I have this understanding of all this stuff, and I still wasn't able to connect it and actually begin to be responsible and make the changes that I wanted to make, and it would make me feel worse. But now it's been, a solid 6 months of just extreme discipline. Jocko Willink is another huge inspiration for me. I get up at 4 a.m. almost every day. I eat very healthy, cook all my meals, like do as much as I can at my job to be as responsible as I can. I'm in a leadership position, so I've learned so much from Jocko, from Goggins, and put it all into practice in my daily life. And just, I'm at a point where I, not perfect. I struggle every single day with all this stuff. I struggle. I still have horrible moments of feeling completely depressed and like I don't know what my future is and why am I doing this? But I push through it now. I think that's what I learned maybe from all this stuff accumulated into one thing that I've kind of realized is you gotta just push through it no matter what. Like you gotta just embrace the suck. I think it's like what Goggins says, and it's true. And so this podcast is a way for me to learn from interesting, engaging people. How long have you been doing therapy, by the way?
I've been doing psychotherapy for about 5-ish years.
Yeah. I mean, you're a professional. You're disciplined in your practice. You see people every day, I'm assuming, that go through this kind of stuff. Yeah. And learning from people like you how I can live a meaningful life. You have routines, you meditate. What is it called again?
Vipassana meditation.
Vipassana meditation, super interesting. I definitely want to talk about that a little bit. And so learning from people like you, just having a discussion about all this stuff that's being discussed in the IDW, and helping myself so I can help other people, I guess, is like what this is about. Like, I'm young. This is like a peer-to-peer thing. Like, I'm going through the struggle every day. I'm not there, and you never can get there, but I'm so far away from it. There's a lot of problems that I want to fix with myself, and I figure, why not document this? Why not talk about the journey that I'm on right now and get people on that, I feel super like very engaged by you. I feel like you're a professional. I don't know a better way to say this, but like when we met, I admired you. I was like, man, this guy is like very articulate. He knows what he's talking about. He's very professional and he's very compassionate, which is rare. We talked about that a little bit, to find people that give you the full attention, really treat you like a human and have compassion. And you were doing that with everyone there at the discussion too, like really listening, really paying attention. And I was like, got to talk to this guy. Like, want to see what he's all about.
Oh, I appreciate it. That's very kind.
That's what this is about. that's kind of what this is about. And it's going to get more clear the more that I do it. So thank you so much for coming on, taking a chance, coming on. This could be a complete bomb. Like, it could, this even our session right now, I don't think so. I think this is going to be great, but thank you. I really appreciate it.
No, it was very flattering to be invited anyway, and it's a unique position to be the first guest, I suppose, on the this kickoff podcast. So there's no precedent. There's nothing that I have in mind per se. I want to be as useful or helpful as possible.
Thank you.
So
tell me. I guess we'll start now.
Yeah.
So you're a therapist. You studied psychology. You studied philosophy.
That's right. Yeah.
And you said something that I thought was really interesting. How you said philosophy gave you questions that you feel like psychology helped you answer.
Yeah, largely. Right.
So
As an undergrad, I mean, that's because of the age that we find ourselves typically as undergrads, you don't know that much about the world in the first place. So you start from this very ignorant, but also very confident place being 20 years old or 18 to 20 years old. Yeah. It's a strange time to be hit with all this information about the world. And I found myself latching on very quickly to just to interesting ideas that interested me specifically. Gotcha. But I double majored, and I also had a very short time. I was a transfer student, so I had 2 years to get in and out.
Gotcha.
So my time was pretty evenly divided between philosophy and psychology, and it was really strange to be in a philosophy classroom where the person that makes the most sense comes out on top or gets the best grade.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it was just to be perfectly honest, it's very humbling to sit in a room of people who don't even bring backpacks to class. They're just sitting there in the lecture hall, just essentially memorizing everything the teacher says, and arguments, and symbolic logic also was really interesting to me. And it was definitely the how and not the what. It was how to think, how to reason, how to take all of that, how to take the philosophy proper into every other situation.
Gotcha.
So it really helped me to back off of that certainty that is really easy to sustain especially at that age.
Gotcha. But for sure.
Humans in general, right? We're just not that well equipped to discern perfectly the world around us. Yeah. It's very pragmatic, a lot of heuristics, and almost the entire field of behavioral economics is letting us know how stupid we are and how wrong we are most of the time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, and then I think going to psych classes from a very research-based orientation at the school, there's such a fine-toothed comb that you can use, and in really diligent, really hardcore research, you can't really be that confident about very much about people. Our brains and our experiences are so complicated. You have to parse so deeply. Tiny emerging detailed facts are the only thing that emerge from the research that you can say, okay, confidently, here's a fact about humans.
Yeah.
So it just made me that much more skeptical about everything I had thought.
You said that in the email, very skeptical. Which I wanted to ask, which we can get into that. But one thing I want to ask, just with all you're saying, is why did you get into therapy? I mean, what was your growing up? I'm just curious what it is that made you want to pursue being a psychologist, getting into philosophy. Were there certain ideas that interested you? Is it the helping other people aspect? What was your reason for even pursuing it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my family was very pro therapy. That was existent in my whole upbringing. But so there was no conversion necessary that I had to pick it up later in life. But psychology was always my first interest, my primary interest, no matter what. I think I knew that I wanted to do that, although, again, people are really good at constructing perfect narratives about when I was 5, this happened, when I was 10, this happened, and then I knew that I was going to...
Gotcha.
I'm not under that illusion, but I do remember, even if I read old essays of mine from high school or from junior college, then they'll always be about, I want to use psychology, I want to do this.
Gotcha.
But therapy, as I was considering going into research also, but therapy was the perfect convergence for me of the real-time person-to-person experience that keeps me awake and on my toes with the applied aspects of what is going on in this human mind and what are the sources and the causes of all of their experiences, good and bad.
Yeah.
And the more, so this might be a little paradoxical, but the more you learn when you're in therapy school, I want to call it grad school, the more that skepticism stayed with me, and I was increasingly skeptical of how wishy-washy a lot of therapy is, a lot of the therapy community.
Wanted to discuss that with you.
Oh, yeah. No, I have a strange relationship with my profession of choice.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if you don't mind me, sorry to interrupt, but I thought just to throw this on the table with what you're talking about, the detachment aspect that we kind of discussed earlier about I mean, you seem like you're very, when we just first meeting you now, able to detach, keep your ego, subdued, which is such a hard thing, a struggle for me every single day.
I gotcha.
And I'm curious about how that plays into therapy. Like, I said this before we started recording, like when I was going through a lot of my stuff, people suggested to me to go to therapy, and I was like, no, I'm not going to go to therapy.
What made them encourage that?
I guess seeing the struggle that I was going through, and like, I guess they must have had a more mature understanding of what therapy is, because I didn't understand what therapy was, right? Like I thought, I'm going to talk to some person who's got their shit together, who's going to like judge me and like ask me questions sitting on a couch. And I've come to learn at least what I believe therapy is. I'm curious to know, like, how do you define like what you're doing when you sit down with a client, like what are you actually doing with that person?
That is the Nobel Prize question, to be honest with you. It is, again, this is not something that I always knew. This is something I'm discovering every day, is that I am less and less equipped to define even what I do. I can tell you what can happen in therapy, but
tell me.
My really short elevator answer is I facilitate change through a relationship. I form a relationship with somebody, and something happens.
Gotcha.
And when students of mine ask, well, what is really going on, or what are you really doing? I just say, nothing. So you know that you leave that room or you leave that session, something has happened, and it's very difficult to point to. And so this is a very deep topic to me. So we could go for as long as you want.
Man, tell me. Like, I'd love to go into it. One thing you said please. That I think ties into that is you were saying like a lot of people complain about the price of therapy. Why is therapy so expensive? Like, and you had such a good answer. Why? And I thought it's such an amazing way to think about therapy. If you like, go into that, like kind of what you told me.
So traditionally, the pop culture therapy experience has something to do with, in my opinion, the history of psychology, and not necessarily the current application. Gotcha. So you imagine being in a dark room, and Freud is behind you with a notepad, and you say something, they listen, and they are this perfect computer of psychology who can see the ins and outs of your life, and they can essentially tell you what's going on in your life. They can tell you what to do. They can tell you how to do it, when to do it. They can tell you what you're doing wrong.
I was thinking.
Totally, it's a normal. It's a normal myth, right? It's an expected myth that, but I mean, if you think about it, when you meet anyone that has a profession that you're completely unacquainted with, and if you start asking them, what do you do on a daily basis? What does your life look like? It's shocking how little we know about what it's like to do that thing, or to be really knowledgeable about that thing. Yeah. And of course, I was in that boat. No matter how many hours of going to therapy, it's a completely different skill set to do therapy, to conduct therapy.
Yeah, man.
And what I was finding in especially grad school was the history of psychology was being, in my opinion, kind of confused for the ideals of therapy. Gotcha. So people were just copycatting, or going backwards in time and going, well, people have always done this, I'll just keep doing this.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I take that skepticism with me. If there's any presumption that I have, or any, they call them theories, but they don't even seem to be theories. They seem to be just ideas that some guy 100 years ago kind of thought, I think people are kind of like this. Yeah. And then he wrote a book, everyone read it, people thought that's brilliant, and then they go about their lives.
Gotcha.
But the less I do, and this is where meditation and therapy converge, is the less I do, the more I realize how much is underneath any of those kind of superficial therapeutic interactions. Oh, you're having problems with your relationship? Here's how to communicate better. And rarely do I find that it's a question of more information, that someone is coming to you and they're saying, oh, I didn't realize that when I rush my husband and I yell at him to do the dishes, that he does them, right? That no one needs to be told that, because that's not how it works, right? Yeah. So it's odd if you leave more space, if you do less, and I'm not talking about doing less in a lazy sense, I'm talking about not getting in the way of the therapy.
Gotcha.
And in meditation, or at least in Vipassana, so it's insight meditation is what Vipassana is. So as you gain insight.
Can we talk about Vipassana meditation?
Segue to Vipassana.
Yeah.
You sit and you just observe reality as it is. So you I think the Buddha said something like, to see the world clearly reduces suffering. So the pain of life may be inevitable, but the suffering is optional.
Yeah.
So all of us are going to confront difficult situations and painful, you name it, especially socially, right?
Yeah,
Breakups and
sure.
disappointments and letdowns. And but your relationship to them, this is very stoic also, is your relationship to them can determine just how bad it is in the long run, or even in that moment. And other people have spoken more eloquently about this, so I'll let Vipassana teachers be Vipassana teachers.
Did you learn about it from Yuval?
Yuval is one of my favorite modern thinkers who also practices, and I'm very inspired by him.
Gotcha.
But in college, there was a buzz, and I watched an old Sam Harris video. I think was the first time that he spoke about meditation, removed from any kind of religious.
Did you get Sam Harris's meditation app?
I do have Waking Up. Yeah.
How is that? I was curious about it.
Oh, it's great. It's fantastic. Cool. Yeah. And what I liked, I think, I was also really resistant to adopting just another thing. Like, oh, great. Okay, so I already have to do schoolwork and blah, blah, blah. And I was coming away from my religious background with my family.
Gotcha.
And I just thought, gosh, another way to waste my time? I don't think so. But it's actually so secular. The benefits are so secular in nature that even there's some Buddhist practitioners that would say even expecting anything from the meditation is another form of clinging or attachment. And so we were talking about the distinction between being unattached and detached.
Yeah, that's a good...
And I try not to be detached, like removed from the world where nothing matters, and I'm just this cold walking refrigerator, and who cares, right? Life
which
sucks.
is a pretty common, like, a lot of people have that thought when you start talking about detachment. It's cold. It's like you're not emotionless. But it's crazy, the common thread between like Jordan Peterson, Goggins, Jocko, Yuval, they all talk about the unattachment, or however you want to
being unattached, right?
How important that is, right?
They share, and I would, relating this back to therapy, this to me is the outcome of therapy, is your relationship to your experiences and yourself ultimately, which are the same thing in my opinion. That changes. So I tell clients this all the time. If I followed you around, if you came to me for therapy and over the next year or however long, I followed you around all week and I just tracked, where do you go and what do you spend money on? And often very little of that changes, unless maybe you're aware of a specific connection between I'm in this unhealthy relationship and therefore I do these things. But for a lot of people, it's just betterment for the well. It's somebody who just needs to become better acquainted with the inner workings of their decision making, and you reduce that automaticity, that automatic, you could call it reactive or mindless behavior. You just become aware. You sit in therapy, and this, in my opinion, another myth of therapy is that you're just telling things to somebody. You're just reporting, and it's all stuff you already knew, and you're just basically making this essay of your life, this verbal essay. You give it to the therapist. And then you go, okay, well, thank you, bye. And they're like this crappy TA who just reads your paper and hands it back to you and goes, here are your errors.
Yeah.
It's completely different if you are met with full attention from somebody who has no expectations about what's going to happen.
I think that's such an important part of it, is like the fact that you stay objective, and I'm, at least you're not showing
as much as possible
to your clients, which I actually saw a therapist not that long ago. And that's, like I was telling you before, that's what it was for me, kind of having an understanding a little bit of how at least I perceive what therapy is. It was like a way for me to think. Like Jordan Peterson says, talking is thinking. It's the best form of thinking. And it's insane how clear your thoughts can get, and how much, like you were just saying, talking about it, like getting it out, is like, it helps you see it for what it really is, rather than you trap it in your mind. That's what happened to me. I mean, I really trapped myself in my mind a lot. It's amazing getting that out, talking about it. It's like, okay, you say it out loud, they react to it, they're staying objective, no one's judging. It makes you see, it's like silly, some of this stuff that like I was freaking out about. It's like silly looking back on it, like, man, the delusion you can create in your mind,
Yeah.
But so, I think Jordan Peterson says this thing. I'm curious what you think about it, because it's definitely detachment, and it ties into that, or being unattached, however you want to phrase it. But he said something that I thought was profound to me and just helped me have this approach day to day in my life, which is consciously making myself as aware as I possibly can be to the fact that I'm a player in this game. I'm playing the game of life. It's not playing me. And it's, for me, tell me what you think about this. I don't know like a better way to put it, but it's like, it's all up to me and the way that I decide to perceive things. That's what it's about. And is that is that the same as unattachment? Deciding to perceive this way? It's like, because everyone struggles, everyone has their horrible days, everyone goes through their depression, their anxiety or whatever, but you can perceive those struggles as times to learn, times to dig deep into yourself and learn who you are and what you can do. And I guess that's the same as like unattaching. Is like, okay, today is going to be a hard day. 2 people didn't show up to work. It's a big day. Things are about to get crazy. How can I succeed right now? And how can I learn from this? In approaching every single struggle in that way, at least that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not perfect. I have horrible days, but like trying to approach my day-to-day life in that way, that when something hits, some hard thing happens, all right, Cole, it's time to act out all this shit you're listening to. Like, how can you actually learn from this? It's like looking down on my life and looking at myself go through my life and kind of staying detached, but also thinking of it as how to win in this situation. You know, I don't know how that ties in. I guess it's all the same thing.
Fortunately, Peterson's also a clinical psychologist, and there's a therapy 101 distinction with the terms content versus process. And so budding therapists in grad school will be introduced to this very early on. And from what you're describing, there's a step before the playing of the game that is, in my opinion, I mean, you could spend the rest of your life on that step, and that's noticing what is going on first.
That's so big.
Before you do anything, right? You don't even have to have a plan. You can just say, wait. Okay, so 2 people called out of work. So the content would be, today it's April 3rd and it's 6:00 a.m. That's all the content. That's just the details of this situation. And Steve and Jim called out of work, and you can put names and labels and things like that on that situation. But the process is, when I get anxious, when I feel unsupported, when I encounter a situation like this where I feel helpless, whatever that non-specific interpretation of the offense is, to me, is the lasting effect. Like, you can imagine, right? If you were a client, you came to therapy, it would not be useful for me to just see you every week and just shoot down every problem. And you go, okay, give me the list. And okay, we have an hour. Here, I have 10 terrible things happening to me this week. What do I do, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't do my homework on Tuesday. Okay, you know what you should do? Go to your teacher, blah, blah, blah. And then we just knocked out.
Yeah.
That would be no use to anybody. That would, it's the feed a man versus teach a man to fish.
Gotcha.
And so your process, what you really take away is, wow, what do you know? I'm the kind of guy who fill in the blank. And so I don't know about, the player in the game is a good metaphor, but I like the idea that your metacognition can take over in those moments, and that, again, this is where the word attachment to me becomes so significant. Is if I become attached to something that is not real, that is, if my expectations are not well aligned with the way the world is. Yeah. If I imagined that every single day my entire crew was going to show up to work, and no one would ever miss a day, and I would have the exact same routine every single day, that is a recipe for disappointment, right?
Yes.
You are going to be disappointed routinely,
sure. Yes.
and more over time. The more you continue expecting that. But if again, this is just, if it's you might wake up in the morning and go, today is going to look like something. I don't know what that is. And if it's this bad, then my day will be that bad. That's what my day will consist of. And if it's not that bad, I can be grateful for that and everything. But I have nothing riding on it needing to be this way. That doesn't mean don't make plans. That doesn't mean don't try to learn and develop skills and things.
Why do you think, like, just, trying to get down to it, trying to get down to that idea. Because you said a second ago, you're like, it wouldn't be helpful listing out the problems and approaching it from like maybe a goal.
One by one.
Because people say the goal-oriented is the way to go. Set your goals, figure out your problems, fix it that way. But it's like you're getting deeper into it, which is like, you're always gonna have problems. So it's like you gotta get past the thought that you can solve your problems, because the moment you solve a problem, another problem arises. So that's like what you're saying. It sounds like it's like
a little bit. I feel a little bit two ways about that, and this is where I'm just not. I don't have a prescription for this or anything.
Gotcha.
So I come down on both sides.
Gotcha.
Of course, goals are extremely motivating. People love to have something to do, and in a way, we all. Even just a temporary goal, I'm hungry, I need to eat.
Yeah.
Let me go get food. I mean, that's a goal in a way, right? It's driven by some kind of inner desire and a set of feelings and discomfort, and you can accomplish that and you can be satiated for some temporary amount of time. But the goal isn't never be hungry again. It's just don't be hungry right now, or feed myself, or nutrition-based things like that.
Yeah.
I also my I don't know if you want to call it a spiritual. A lot of people call these things spiritual. Interpretation of that is, for example, if I were meditating, I might say, okay, so this is what it's like to be hungry. I wonder where in my life do I react to hunger in maybe an unhealthy way? And maybe I don't, right? Maybe I learn, oh, great, I like the way that I feed myself and I pursue food, et cetera.
Gotcha.
But so right now, we might be talking about food, but you can imagine big time. When I need affection, what do I do?
Yeah.
When I really want to connect with somebody, how do I get that need met? Is it even a need? And you might dial it back so far that you lose the attachment to the need itself, and you don't miss it. And that was a game changer for me.
That's the goal, right?
That motivates me a lot.
Yeah.
And when I meditate about an hour every day, and an hour.
That's rough.
Is a long time.
For an hour a day.
A lot of people are so much better than I am at it, but you work your way up to some amount of time, and a lot goes on in that hour. And you're doing. If anyone walked in the room, they'd say, "Oh, like a hunter just sitting on the ground." But it's very strange how much is actually happening.
Yeah, for sure.
And you don't have to add anything to your consciousness or to your psyche to completely stir up your anxiety or your doubts about the future, your hopelessness. You could be sitting there perfectly calm, and the next minute you're freaking out. Oh my God, it's tax season. I shouldn't have said that thing to that person the other day. And you didn't need any prompt. So then you go out into the world and you have every prompt you could possibly imagine.
Yep.
And it gets very complicated.
Oh yeah.
So,
it's like what Yuval said, right? He said our problems exist within. What did he say? Our problems are in the delusions that we create, or he said something like that, where it's
the myths,
like
or
our actual. Most of the problems that we face are in our minds, or he phrased it.
Stories that we create.
The stories we create. I think that's what he's saying. It's definitely true. I don't meditate. I meditate maybe 20 minutes, and I don't do it every day. I meditate maybe 4 or 5 times a week, and it's rough. Just the 20 minutes, like it's my mind goes everywhere. So
can I ask you about you had mentioned, so I love that you have this comparison also to the past, where I also have perhaps the luxury, I'm not sure, it sounds like you're in a much better place now, but I've only met you recently. So I'm just wondering, who would I have met back then? Go back 6 months, a year, 5 years. What is this ego you were talking about? And how were you so different than you are now?
That's the way you would have met. Like I was saying, Notes from Underground, that book, I was the underground man. I was living from a selfish point of view, like egotistical and very unaware of it. It's the problem with narcissistic people is they don't realize that they're narcissistic. There's a justification for everything. And I was that person. I was, definitely very immature, definitely narcissistic, irresponsible, I was very socially anxious. And a lot of that was because it's like hard to explain. It's like all the stuff that I wasn't doing right, at least deemed by myself, from my perspective, the things that I knew deep down, I can do better than this. I should be doing better than this. All of that I pushed away, I pushed down so much that it manifested in the way that I socially interacted. Couldn't make eye contact with people, didn't feel confident, couldn't speak in front of people, wasn't a good leader at work, was a bad manager, focused on, it was from an egotistical perspective. Like I would get offended very easily.
Could you square the anxiety with the narcissism? How?
I mean, not really. Like I was very lost, very unaware, which I feel like awareness is, it's like you're saying, it's such a key to life. Living your life, being as hyper aware as you can be of everything happening, of other people, but yourself also. And when that awakening happened in me, becoming very aware and then practicing it and doing everything I could to continue to become more aware, that was a huge game changer. Big game changer. Just, man, it's pretty crazy, the shift. It's hard to like articulate it, but because other people would tell you, maybe if you met a coworker, they would have said, yeah, Cole, he was cool. He's a good manager. He's responsible. Because I always showed up to work. I never was late. I would work from like 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. sometimes and do the best job I can do, run the production facility, make shit happen, when things started going wrong. But it's like in my mind, it was a good way to put it is that I was acting like a responsible person. I was acting responsible. I was doing the things that I needed to do. I was being a good manager in terms of getting everything done the way that I need to get done. But in my mind, I was completely on the other side, blaming everyone for the pain I was feeling, not taking responsibility for anything that would go wrong, and it's like when I became aware, I realized I need to make the way that I'm acting, I need to make the way that I want to think fit with the way that I'm acting. Like I actually need to start thinking and perceiving myself the way that I am acting, which was like a competent, responsible, conscientious guy. But in my mind, I was so like resentful of the life that I was living. I felt trapped. I felt like lost. I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. I gave up on stuff I wanted to do, and it was all up here in my mind. And then that awakening happened of, you need to start thinking the way you're acting, and you need to start doing more. Like, just be the best person you can be. Like, all that stuff that's causing you this pain, the things you're negating, the responsibilities that you are not living up to, start fixing it slowly, day to day. So, and now that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to be responsible. I'm trying to be a good manager at work. I'm learning every single day about leadership, how to be a good leader, how to be a manager, how to be a good father. I'm learning. I'm by no means great or anything. I'm have a lot of work and always will. But that was the shift, I guess, was becoming aware of how I wanted to be and then trying to act it out. That makes sense. Rambling on.
No, yeah. What made you want that? I mean,
man, I guess
changing a want is difficult often.
It happened fast, I guess. It's like what Jordan Peterson says about when the ice is shattered beneath you and the chaos arises. It's like the facade that I had built was shattered, and I realized in my mind how pathetic I was being. In my mind, how I felt about myself, which was I felt like I could be more and do more. And that was what changed the want, was realizing I guess that's the way to put it, like realizing that this isn't who I am. I'm so far strayed away from the values that I think I have. It's like, who was the one that said it? Was Nietzsche that said he thinks that we have to create our own values? And then Jordan Peterson always says we can't create our own values. And I kind of agree with that. I feel like personality, we all have different personalities, personality traits. We know all that stuff, character traits. I had a certain set of values kind of growing up. There were certain things in high school that I felt really good about. I was with someone throughout my whole high school with the same, had my high school sweetheart, 4 years together, and things were going well. When all that ended, when I left my home, everything just went downhill. Became very irresponsible, didn't know what I was doing, didn't have an aim for my future. And I lost my values, I guess. I became completely unattached or detached from my values. And then went downhill, and then I guess rediscovered my values in that dark moment. Maybe that's what happened, was like
Perhaps.
rediscovered the values and the person that I want to be. And, you know, I forgot what your initial question was, but
no, just I was just wondering how you discovered a new set of desires and values.
That's a crazy question, man.
Tough.
I don't know. That's the part of why I want to do this podcast. Maybe someone can help me figure out like how the hell did, because I guess I don't know how to say it, but I feel like definitely what happened was I rediscovered my values. And I think it took me almost killing myself to get there. Being in that completely, you know, that completely lost, ready to end it state, and just having this kind of vision and feeling of what you could be. You know, I don't know a better way to put it. I still don't know the answer. That's why. You know.
I noticed the role, or I guess I would say the value of discovery in and of itself.
And Jordan Peterson, huge help, obviously. Like he sparked that in me. He sparked, you know, becoming aware of it. Definitely that was a big spark for me. You know, so.
Yeah. And whatever works. I find it's almost this moment in a lot of times in therapy, this will happen where someone will refer to themselves, not necessarily talk about themselves in the third person, but talk as though they were someone else and say, wow, I want something. And they never knew what was important to them. They might say, I never realized I really want to come out to my parents, and I never have, right? It could be anything. Someone will say, I never realized how much I hate my best friend. Strange things that you would think, well, if anyone would know that, it would be you.
Yeah,
and,
that's very true.
Yuval Harari hammers this home a lot, and he reminds us that if you want free will in the sense that you can do what you want, then yeah, of course you have that. But if you want free will in the sense that you can choose what you want, you don't have that. You can't necessarily control. We're all influenced and things change, but we don't have a very good account for why that happens.
It's very interesting.
We are just somebody, and we're figuring it out. I'm sure you know what it's like, or I'd love to know if an example comes to mind, but I know what it's like when someone will say, well, I never realized you fill in the blank, you know, XYZ. I never realized you liked doing this so much, or I never realized how often you blah, 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 or you say this, or when someone does an impression of you or something, and you get self-conscious, like, it's not like the information wasn't there. It's always been on the table, but you discover this thing that someone else knew way better than you.
That's very true. It's really interesting, an example that comes to mind is my job, which is, you know, I run a production facility, kitchen manager, run a crew of 5 people. Been doing it for 5 years now about. And, you know, it's like really crazy thinking about it, but I never saw myself as a competent, like conscientious leader running this production facility. Like it all kind of happened super fast. And for the first couple of years doing it, it was more like, this is what I need to do. Like I got to do this to get this done. But I never stepped into that role and saw myself as like conscientious. And I was getting, there were times where I was working from like 4 a.m. to 6 p.m., sometimes 4 a.m. to like 8 p.m. And that's not common for people to kind of put those hours in, like, you know, and I never really thought about myself in that way. I kind of thought like, oh, this is what I need to do. This is the job. And then obviously when shit started going sour, I started resenting the feeling of I'm putting all this work in, and I kind of felt trapped and started feeling bad about it. And then I had that shift of like, man, this is a quality about myself that I need to capitalize on. I need to capitalize on the fact that I can like do this work and I can put in these hours and I can get up early. And I started loving that about myself. And I don't even, you know how that, I think that shift happened listening to like Goggins and Jocko Willink and Jordan Peterson and just kind of analyzing my life, trying to do it from an objective perspective. But man, I was just thinking like, when you meditate for an hour, that's crazy. I mean, that's awesome. What, like, what's the goal with that meditation? Are you thinking of a mantra, or is it kind of the typical don't think of anything when you're meditating? Because I want to know how that's helped you actually, because you seem to me like, we haven't known each other long, but you're awesome in terms of you staying unattached, but being compassionate, not letting your ego get in control.
Well,
how do you actually implement the meditation? What do you do when you meditate? What are you thinking? And how do you actually implement that? Because I'm sure a lot of people would love to. It's hard meditating. It's really hard to get going with it.
Yeah,
and how, what's some information you can give people trying to get started with it?
My full disclaimer is I am not the best authority or the perfect ambassador for this, because it's been described and explained way better than I can do. But I'll repeat the people that have most influenced me. But what the directions that are given most of the time have something to do with going back to the breath, because your breath is something that is always there. It's constant. You can rely on it, and it's largely autonomic. So it's something that you can focus on without it necessarily changing. Of course, we can change our breath if we want to, but that's part of the deal. So there's no goal in that. You never get somewhere and you say, "Oh, good, I meditated, I did it." You don't achieve some out of body experience. You don't practice a mantra until you forget your problems.
Gotcha.
Nothing like that. That's what draws me to Vipassana specifically. And it really is about just focusing on your inner experience as, again, just as an analog for the outside. So if Yuval describes this in a lot of interviews, people are catching on that he's a big meditator. And he says, if I can't focus on my breath for 10 seconds, how am I going to keep every socioeconomic...
Actually, I remember that quote.
Oh, yeah, from the interview.
That's definitely so true.
That's a great...
Yeah.
It's a great perspective, and
sure.
I never would have described it like that, but I prefer his explanation.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think of anything the same way. If I not only, so I'll tie it back to therapy too. Not only am I already bad at tracking my own experiences, how am I going to get into somebody else's life, even temporarily, for 50 minutes and track everything they're saying and roll with the significance of their life and what they're telling me.
Yeah.
So it's really practice. The goal is the practice.
Gotcha.
And
I mean, that's a good way to think about it, because I do know a lot of people think of meditation as some gateway to having a spiritual experience, out of body, astral projection.
Really allergic to that.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So here's, again, this is a partial plug for anyone seeking therapy or anyone who's kind of reluctant about therapy. Yep. If you are fearing going to a therapist who's going to be so passive that you're going to feel ignored, I'm totally with you. And similarly, if you're going to go to a therapist because they're going to bark at you and tell you what to do, I also sympathize with you. Perhaps more on that note. Gotcha. I have, this is something I mentioned earlier that I don't tend to self-disclose in therapy. And I was not like that. At the beginning, I thought, more is more.
Yeah,
if you've gone through something, or if someone wants to know something about you, make them feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
But with meditation, you don't get the luxury of being able to distract yourself by, let's say, focusing on somebody else. So I always find it interesting to start right there. If somebody comes into therapy for the first time and they say, "This is what my life looks like," and it doesn't look good, and then they start saying, "Well, what about you? Are you married? Where'd you go to school? How old are you?" Already they've shifted the conversation away from what's most meaningful to them.
Right. That's very true.
They insist sometimes, this is the most cynical type of conversation, involves people really frustrated. Well, have you ever used drugs? Do you even know what it's like? And what, in my own personal therapy and from talking to people much wiser than me, I was more or less convinced not to do that. And at this point, I've never regretted not self-disclosing, and I have regretted self-disclosing.
Gotcha.
And you have such a more rich conversation to talk to somebody about, well, what would that mean?
Gotcha.
Why is that so important to you? Do you imagine I can't help you get to where you're going just because I'm this age and not this age? Or, and if you really look closely, no two people have an identical experience. So it'd be very arrogant of me to say, "Oh, you're going through divorce? Oh, well, I've been divorced." So I think
what is your,
who knows?
I was wondering, like, what if just to put it in a simpler way, you think it's better to not disclose because it helps you keep the focus on the other person?
Absolutely. To me, it's the most compassionate. Again, this is in my own psychotherapy.
Yeah.
It wasn't even necessarily explicitly told to me like it's not a rule, right?
Yeah.
I tell people also it's not a policy. If someone asks me, have you seen this movie or something, I have no problem telling them that. But in a way, if something is significant to someone, what I'm trying not to do is interfere with that. I don't want to get in the way of that.
Gotcha.
And to the extent that I'm the most important person in the room, or that I'm even the focus, something's not right. I have not done my job. I'm not doing my part to let you know this is completely about you, and we have a relationship, but it's not. I'm not your buddy, and it's not because that's bad. It's just it's deeper than that, right?
Deeper, right?
We might go to our buddies to cheer us up, or to kind of encourage us, or to support us, and go like, yeah, you can do it, But with a therapist, to me, the door frame is just way wider.
Yeah.
So that open door needs to encompass anything that might mean to that person.
So let me ask you this question then. I'm curious about this. This is something I've been curious about. Never sat down with a therapist and had an actual deep conversation. But what about clients that view you as like a father figure? So they do want you to be supportive and more open. And I mean, how does that work in therapy when if you have a woman that sees you as sexually, I know Carl Jung talks about that and started listening to one of his audiobooks, how, because man, that must be complicated just to handle those types of situations. Someone that I know I had struggled with that, attaching to people that I wanted support from in a fatherly or brotherly way. So if someone came into you and did want you to open up and did kind of want that companionship from you, how do you handle a situation like that?
It's all discovery. It's all exploration to me.
Yeah.
So if we just talk about facts, right?
Yeah.
When you meditate, everything that arises becomes a new fact, even if it's a subjective fact. It's something. Even a headache is a fact, right? It's ontologically subjective. It requires a mind to have a headache, right?
Yeah.
But you have a headache, right? One way or the other. I'm never going to know what it's like to have your headache. I'm never going to know what it's like to be in your head with that pain.
Yeah.
You can describe it to me, but what's important isn't, oh, well, I don't have a headache, right? That would be, imagine that response, right? You say, dude, I have a headache right now. And I said, oh, well, I don't. Right?
Cold.
What the hell, right? But we can talk about your headache because that is a fact that you have to live with every day, right? So in the therapy room, it's a guarantee. It's not just a possibility or a hypothetical scenario. Every person, this is what is called transference, is somebody is treating you as though you had qualities that you don't or probably don't because of their relationship with those qualities elsewhere.
Gotcha.
So if I appear to be a young male and somebody's treating me like a father figure, a boyfriend, a son, something where a young male would be that stereotype, that becomes very interesting. And what they call erotic transference, or romantic feelings.
Who was it? Is that Carl Jung? That I'm not sure who you studied, but
all the psychodynamic,
gotcha.
Typically guys, right? But psychologists from the past have talked about transference.
Gotcha.
And it's still talked about. I mean, it's a I'm not Freudian, but transference in the loose sense where we're all treating each other a little unfairly. We're all expecting something of each other, whether it's too much or too little. I mean, this is my opinion, but I mean, who really perfectly is aligning their expectations with somebody exactly with who they are and what they're capable of? I don't know. We don't know enough about each other to even do that, right? And so all these leaps and heuristics we have to use. So someone comes into the therapy room, and of course the focus is about them, the person. And if after 2 sessions they say, I think I'm in love with you, and
I was going to ask about
it's
that.
just another fact. You go, wow, a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah.
Having somebody that will sit with you and just accept you and acknowledge you, that whatever that button, that trigger response is, I'm noticing you're very sensitive to that. And then go from there, right?
Yeah.
And ideally, again, if I'm doing my job, it's not about me, right? It's not about, oh wow, this client fell in love with me. It must mean something about me.
Yeah.
It has something to do with them. and you can go back to them. And again, just connecting the therapy to the meditation to everything, to life's meaning in general, is we automatically do this stuff so much. It shocked me how much I do that when I started meditating also.
Gotcha.
A spark, a memory will turn into this forest fire of, you mentioned the word delusion. That's also a Buddhist term. He didn't use it like psychosis, but
Gotcha.
the Buddha would talk about delusion as being basically ignorance, anything that is not true.
Makes sense.
So anything you believe that doesn't perfectly represent the world. So if the delusion is anyone who pays attention to me for 2 hours is someone I could be with the rest of my life, I mean, where else does that come up? You know, where would that manifest, or where would that show up in a person's life, right?
That makes, I mean, that's...
So you learn something, right? Wow, I'm really sensitive to this.
Damn.
Do I have any relationships where someone pays attention to me like this? And then if not, again, you're in therapy. It's the perfect place to go there.
Yeah.
Now you can talk to your therapist. Oh my God, I fell in love with you after 2 hours, 2 sessions.
Gotcha.
I'm realizing that I don't, I'm like this in my relationships. I don't let people even acknowledge me in other places, or you know what I mean? You just go there,
sense,
right?
For sure. So you just go.
And that's therapy.
You go deeper to the the deep problem. Why it did that happen,
and you
then
just
how
search,
do you apply
right?
it?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And I would be, again, just word to the wise. I wouldn't trust somebody who would claim to have all the information necessary to a therapist. I mean, to make that type of hard, fast statement about this is what's going on and here's what to do about it.
Yeah.
Here's what we do.
Gotcha.
You're doing this because of this and blah, blah, blah. Maybe if you're reflecting it back, it's something that the client already said.
Yeah.
But I mean, just there's always going to be more.
Yeah.
It's always deeper than that.
Yeah. Let me ask you
we could all do better. Yeah.
Sorry.
Please.
Like, I had a friend that actually told me that she didn't like therapy because she felt like it's reliving your problems over and over. And I'm curious what is the dichotomy of therapy right now? To me, I would love to have you as a therapist. Like you seem like exactly the kind of therapy you get it, being objective. But what are, like, anyone that might be looking for therapy or might be considering it, you've done a damn good job of convincing that it's, definitely something you should do and it can help you a lot. But what are some signs that you would say, first meeting with a therapist, what's something that you would say is a red flag that this might not be good?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I've thought about that, like when I've gone,
100%. I think about this a lot. And by the way, if this is just very therapy centric, steer us on a different path. But
gotcha.
I could talk about this all day because again, delving into this profession, I see even my colleagues, and I find that there is a tendency to get licensed or to finish school and then just coast and just go, okay, I got it. I got all the answers. I know what to do. And it's just this robotic spitting things out.
Gotcha.
If you get that vibe, if you sit, and I encourage everyone, shop around.
Yeah.
Go wherever you have to go. Ask about what the person's kind of philosophy is about therapy.
Gotcha.
Just on this personal level. How do they talk to you? If someone is really, really overly nurturing and you think that's going to bother you, go to someone else.
Gotcha.
But I love to ask why me all the time. Red flags, I think so I could talk about red flags for me, but I think generally speaking, if you think that this person has anything riding on their performance, I'm putting that in quotes, if that person has any kind of ego or self that's going to get in the way, run in the opposite direction. If that person has something invested in they're doing therapy for them rather than for you, that could look like anything.
Yeah,
right? That could look like too knowledgeable, too authoritative, too talkative on the phone,
Gotcha.
too pushy maybe, too quick to evaluate. You feel like if you're not the one, if you're the client and you're not the one doing 95% of the talking most of the time, at least, more than 50%, I hope, that's weird.
Gotcha.
And
that's good to know. I mean, that's definitely good to know. Jordan Peterson said he had a client that literally would come in and talk to him for an hour and leave.
Oh yeah, that's not that uncommon.
Yeah, so
I'm happy to be that space. I mean, I'd never want to underestimate. That was the myth I was talking about earlier. Is like that. I think people underestimate the value of just doing that. where else in your life can you do that?
That's
Very
so
few
true.
places.
I mean,
right?
I think that's why it's so expensive to go to therapy, because for most people, you don't have that in your personal life. It's not there. You can't feel safe and comfortable, and like this person is here to listen to you and being objective with you. It doesn't exist. So definitely worth it.
And you mentioned expenses is a great expense. Might not just be money, by the way. If you have to go to an office building somewhere that's a little inconvenient, it's hard to find parking, all that stuff, that can, in the human mind, can sound like this long list of barriers. There's a reason for all that. And you don't want a therapist either who has 40 clients every week. That is, there's no way a fully attentive human mind can endure that and do a good job. How would you like to be the 9th client at the end of the day?
How do you handle on a personal level?
I don't take on that. I work at a lot of different places, but my hourly demands every week is not that much, not as much as people think. I also consult between maybe 5 and 10 hours, I would say, on average every week. And that's like a part-time job for me, just not sucking at this job. Meeting with colleagues, meeting with other people, talking to other people. How am I doing? This client is a struggle for me. How can I do better?
That's interesting. You don't think about that.
Like, I wouldn't psychotherapy.
Think about that you talk to other therapists about what you're experiencing as a therapist. That's 100%. Really interesting.
I don't. Again, this is just maybe a strong opinion, but I wouldn't trust any therapist who doesn't go to therapy or sometimes, not, you don't have to go every week for the rest of your life necessarily.
That seems counterintuitive, right? You would think that your therapist you'd want wouldn't be going to therapy, but it makes everything you're saying just makes
you would.
Sense.
You want that.
For sure, yeah.
As open, you're never going to have it all right.
Yeah.
I'm sure in this conversation with you today, there's going to be stuff that in 10 years I listen to this, and I'm like, oh, really? You thought that?
I'm going to think that as soon as we stop recording.
I hope, upon first review, we'll be like, oh, I should have. But that's beautiful to me. That just like being in therapy, just like how the client, there's no demand on the client to be perfectly consistent week to week. And if the therapist is being nitpicky and say, 9 months ago you said blah blah blah, so which is it, right? This evaluative tone.
That's the thing. A lot of people fear that for sure. 100%. Yeah.
But you want to model that too. You want to. I have a way I've grown a lot is just being way less attached or way less insistent that everything I say is going to be a permanent, set in stone statement about the nature of reality.
Gotcha.
We all suck at it, and so being wrong is par for the course. And the more you're wrong, the more you know which direction not to go. Gotcha. So that's nice. Oh, I'm sorry. I must have misinterpreted that. I misunderstood you. Didn't hear you. I forgot. I want to model that for people. I want that to be okay for people to do.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing thing to say. I mean, that's one of those struggles I had for years, was not being okay with being wrong. It's Jordan Peterson said it, and it's exactly what happened to me. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on conscience, like when you're meditating, all that stuff. But that's when when he said he turned 25 or whatever age he said, he started hearing that second voice in his head. And it was this argument between his, I guess, ego part of himself that's putting up the facade and always trying to be right, and then the part of himself that's calling out the bullshit. That happened to me. And that's the split that happened that started making me, and I guess what I decided to do, thank God, like all this content is on the internet and stuff now, is I decided to start listening to that voice and consciously acting out what it was telling me to do. Like listening to it, and the moment something would come up that would make me feel pathetic, or the moment I would have that thought of, you were just an asshole at work, you just said something that was about your ego, I would start, I have been trying every day to really listen to that and act it out. And I'm curious, coming from someone who studied psychology, what the hell is that part of yourself, that conscience, or what is your philosophy on that? And even tying it into meditation, like when I meditate, it becomes very clear to me, that voice. That's when I hear it the most clear, is when I meditate and focus on my breath, and then that voice that just starts going crazy. It's like, actually listen to it. Anyway, I'm just curious,
That's a good question. So just full disclaimer, I'm a marriage and family therapist, but I don't know everything there is to know about the human mind.
I mean,
no,
just curious to get your
no one
perspective
does, obviously.
on it.
No, yeah, but can I know a little more specifically? When you say conscience, do you mean your moral conscience?
That's a good question. I don't even. That's a good question. I mean, it's like that short film I made that you watch. It's like that's the feeling. Is it's almost the judge, my judge, the internal judge that can be judging me in a positive way, but also in a negative way. You know, one thing that I like to think about, that I try to act out day to day, moment to moment, even I try to think about this is like in every moment of my life right now, you and me sitting here talking, there's a version of myself that's living up to my potential fully and making that conscious decision to actually try to aim to be that version of myself is like a goal that I try to do every day. But I feel like the conscience that I'm talking about is the me at the top of that hierarchy judging myself. And it's like, it can be a horrible feeling.
Saying what? Why?
Saying like, you know, why did you say that to him at work? Or why are you doing this? Or why didn't you do that? Why didn't you cook? Why aren't you doing your dishes? You need to clean right now. You need to do your laundry. You're not being a good father right now. You need to do this. You need to do that. Like that it's crazy that how much that feels like it's not you. It feels like it's something else. I'm just like curious.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. Well, so my short answer is I have no idea. I am sympathetic though to the multiple systems in our brain that compete in certain ways, and some of our systems get us out of bed and get us to do the mindless routine activities, and some of them get us to do really complicated stuff. And I just, when I hear conscience, also I think about like there are inclinations that we have, but there's also like an ethical hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean, that's very
true. We're
true.
evaluating, why did you, for example, why did you say that to the guy at work? You're so stupid. Sounds different to me than why did you say that to the guy at work? That was so mean.
Yeah,
you know, and you,
it's true.
Like this source of regret.
I'm hard on myself. It's a problem I struggle with.
Well, yeah.
Day.
I wonder what's the. Okay, so this happens in meditation too.
Yeah.
If you get distracted, the direction is basically just come back to, they call it waking up or coming back to the breath. So you go back to where you were, and then you're in the moment again. And but there's this layered meta phenomenon where you realize you're distracted, then you get pissed off that you were distracted. So now you're pissed off and distracted. Yeah. But then if you can go another layer, now you're pissed off that you got pissed off because you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to get mad at myself for that. I'm just supposed to have this equanimity.
Been there.
Yeah, right. So now you're being critical about being critical, which means now you can be critical about being critical about being critical about coming back. And it's all bad. It has to, you have to pull the plug somewhere.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I guess I was just trying to think of the way to articulate the feeling of that conscience. I guess like everyone has that, right? It's like that ultimate judge. I guess some people think that that's what God is. God is the ultimate judge trying to get you to be the best you can be. And for me, now that we're talking about this, like going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think that's what was causing me so much of the like pain that I was having was I was ignoring that voice. I was not listening to it, and I started resenting it. I started resenting that feeling that I'm not doing what I need to be doing. But I guess it's relative because how is that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's like,
well, I if this is not too nitpicky, I would push back on best. And so if there's a value system there, and I am big on value system. You need to. Peterson has said also. There is no value-free decision. If you're making a decision or not making a decision, that is a decision. Yeah. And you've made that decision instead of any other decision. In an infinite list, you did one thing and you did not do, by definition, you did not do any of the other things, right? So we're always doing something. Yeah. But should implies can.
Right. That's
good. And you could spend the rest of your life on can.
Yeah.
You could do nothing else other than go, well, what can this look like? What can this conversation look like? What can this relationship look like?
Yeah.
And instead of saying, oh, I should have said that thing. I should have been nicer. He should have liked me more. Maybe he should have been nicer. That he should have provided this thing or this opportunity. But could it have happened that way? And if so, what happened? Can I live in a world where this person did not do those things? Can I live in a world where I make these mistakes, or can I live with myself now? Or
good way to think about it.
And you don't go anywhere. You could just sit by yourself in your head, and nothing has even happened yet. You're stuck back at, again, just trying to see the world clearly. Can this world even exist? The one that I want. Can I both make my bed, cook my breakfast, and make it to work on time? Maybe not. So kind of like I with clients, a lot of the times this will happen. I do a lot of group therapy.
Yeah, you're saying that.
And in group, you get this immediate. I use the metaphor of a funhouse mirror effect, where everyone is holding up some funhouse mirror, and no one, just like you and I are sitting here having this conversation. And if we turned everything off, and then a stranger came in the room and they said, "Okay, now Cole, you're going to describe Hunter, and Hunter, you're going to describe Cole, and you have to get it right." We would fail at that completely. If I said, he's like this and like this and like this, but it would be kind of close. Yeah. But if there were 100 of us in this room and 99 of us had to describe you or me, we'd get a much closer picture. We'd get my tendencies and patterns over time and things like that. So in a group therapy, everyone's holding up this oddly shaped mirror, but in aggregate, you get a better picture of who you are.
Gotcha.
And you can get that immediate feedback, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the times, a group member will say, well, they shouldn't have said that. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that what I hear is, I prefer to live in a world where I don't have to hear that. And you might not live in that world. And the rude awakening in group therapy is sometimes, oh, people really bother me.
Yeah.
Or I really don't know how to sit in a group where someone is like this.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see how one person can totally take over the vibe or the mood of a room just because of who they are.
Yeah.
And everyone reacts to that. Yeah. But again, you can go back to yourself and you can go, wow, what does that say about me? And it doesn't mean you should, quote unquote, should be okay with every possible scenario. But it's amazing if you just start with can or is. What is this like for me? Yeah. Wow, this person spoke really rudely to me. Maybe charitable interpretation. They didn't mean anything by it, but I really reacted to that. What do you know? I really react to people who raise their voice, who aren't mild-mannered, and oh my gosh, that reminds me of this other thing. You go back, and before you know it, you get to choose what you should do. And now the should has nothing to do with anyone else.
Yeah.
So I go a little in circles sometimes when I hear someone say, like, this is the best or the worst.
That's
like, how do
awesome.
You know?
I mean, it goes back to the being objective about your life, trying to unattach. But I want to ask you, like, how do you choose what's right?
That's
like
the question,
how,
right?
How do you choose what's right? Because it is so relative. How do you decide? And even in a moment where you unattach, you analyze it, you sit in that moment, everything you're talking about, when you get to that place of feeling like you're not consumed by whatever it was that happened, how do you choose what's right?
Yeah.
And I guess what I experienced for me is that voice is how I choose what's right. That voice that tells me whatever it is.
Is that always available to you?
I mean,
can you just tune in and go, oh, that?
See, I mean, that's the practice I'm trying to practice is how can I make that voice available to me all the time? But I've realized when I'm not hearing that voice is when I have the worst days that I have, where I'm letting my ego get the better of me. I'm not paying full attention to the people at work or, friends or whatever. I'm not listening. I'm having struggles with mundane things I'm doing in my daily routines, or something goes wrong, or just the little stuff. Though the days where I'm not listening to that voice, I'm so detached from it, are the days where I'm having like the worst days that I have. And I don't know. Yeah, it's a crazy thing. I've always thought about it as, that's my conscience. That's the cricket from Pinocchio, telling me, oh, you should have done this or you should do that. But you make such a good point that what is that and how do you choose? Like if I I feel like what I've done is kind of learn to detach or unattach myself and then listen to that voice. And then that's what helps me. But how do you know if it's right or wrong? I mean, what is that?
That's a very good question. Okay, so I'll just, my short answer to that is, this is not new, by the way, but suffering is the critical word to me. It's the one undeniable experience to me.
So you're with Jordan Peterson on that?
Oh, and he is with everyone in the last 3,000 years from the East, right? We're all, I mean, my gut feeling is that people kind of know that. When you talk to somebody, no matter what kind of conversation you're having, you can always go back to that. You can always go, so someone might rant and rave about some experience, some trip to Hawaii, and you might kind of doubt, like you might go, I don't know, wasn't that great, you know? Or we get FOMO about stuff. Oh, I could have been there. I could have had the best experience of my life. But all that goes out the window if you are suffering. If someone gets a cancer diagnosis, if somebody loses somebody close to them, that will zap you back into what people are calling the present moment.
Yeah.
You can always come back to, whoa, this just got really bad really fast.
Yeah.
And there's no wiggle room, right? So anyway, if I really don't know what to do, I can go back to, how do I just reduce suffering? Maybe the process of deciding what to do is driving me nuts. And maybe I need to check back in and go, why am I so obsessed with this?
Yeah.
Why am I needing a singular answer about what to do next? Why don't I just pick up the book and read it instead of laboring over this? But what I just, the conscience as a voice could be a lot of things, and it can be masked in a lot of things.
Yeah.
And this is other stuff that I don't know about your background, but just briefly you were telling me about
whatever. Ask me whatever. Sorry about the sound. If you guys hear, I'm in my apartment hallway, right next to the door.
Oh, I see. I guess people will complain a lot of the time, just in daily life. People complain about people who are not considerate enough. And one thing I do like about Peterson is he has a lot to say about people who do too much.
Yeah.
And not in the Zen sense of doing too much because you're overdoing it, but being, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is not to be nice. And people who are always nice, I find, suffer a lot, or that's at least a recipe for suffering.
Seems like that, right?
And I don't mean that being kind to people is a bad thing. I just, what people imagine to be nice or people label as being nice can take other forms.
For sure.
Being codependent, being quote unquote weak, or being a pushover. We have names for these things.
I experienced that firsthand. I was a pushover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make any guesses or anything, but I was just wondering if you had a relationship with codependence or feeling like your role was doing something for someone.
Yeah, I did.
Something that even if you didn't want to.
Yeah, I did. Definitely. I mean, I definitely felt like I had to do, certain things at work for certain people. I definitely felt like I had to stay at this job for certain reasons. And, definitely I think a lot of people experience that with their job, right? It's an insane responsibility. And I was like a pushover. I definitely, and not to the extreme, but I guess a better way to phrase it would be that I did not speak my mind enough when I should have. In a not in a mean way, just from a managerial perspective. Like I would not go there because I was afraid of the confrontation, and now I have no problems at all saying things I need to say, having meetings with everyone, whatever it is. And from a compassionate place now too, after all of this, we were talking about that. So it is, it's a really interesting thing. The whole conscience thing. I mean, it's really...
Speaking up is... This, I wonder if you identified as strongly with Peterson's big on logos and speaking. Yeah. It's a form of thinking, but it's information. So it's more it's truth, right? And you can't. I notice I can't work with something that I don't know.
Yeah.
And that sounds maybe obvious or or trite, but I'm just thinking of how much we do in our heads that's considered manners or something like that.
Yeah.
And we briefly mentioned small talk before this, and
Yeah. I'm horrible at small talk.
everyone hates it. And I feel two ways. We all hate the experience, but I notice it can be necessary at times to figure out what's maybe going to be appropriate, or where can I go with this person in order to preserve that interaction.
Yeah.
Because maybe I don't need to go deep with this person or that person. Maybe I don't need to swear around my grandmother. Maybe my boss doesn't need to know about my deepest, darkest sexual fantasies. Maybe, we all draw the line somewhere, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So similarly, I think about how burdensome it is to have a whole relationship with somebody in your head, and rules about, well, I can't do this, and I can't do that, and I need to do this, and I'm the only person here to take care of this person, and
it's very burdensome.
Oh,
it's crazy. I lived in my head for years. That's where I lived.
Yeah,
all in my head. And yeah, definitely, you're spot on with that. I mean, it's crazy how just talking, even if it's not to a therapist, but just getting it out of your mind can help relieve the burden.
Yeah,
and it's also, I don't know how to segue into this, but Jocko Willink is a huge inspiration for me, and his extreme ownership idea. It has changed the dynamic of my work environment so much when I decided I am going to take responsibility for this whole thing, for this kitchen, for the employees, for everything bad that happens. It is my fault. If I have an employee that's not performing, it's my fault. I'm not doing a good job being a leader. I'm not communicating effectively to how this needs to get done or whatever. And having that realization of what it means to take ownership, along with starting to speak my mind the moment something arises, I feel like was a huge key to me getting out of my head and starting to see myself objectively, I guess. I mean, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I started just thinking, I don't have a good relationship with this person. It's my fault. How can I make it better? Why wouldn't I want to make it better? People hold on to grudges, right? So easily. Someone offends you, you hold on to it. You don't let it go. It manifests as passive aggressiveness or whatever. That was happening in my life all the time. And I just wanted to be above that, if you know what I mean. Just how can I be, I get, this is something that I like to say that I think at the discussion we had, or at the IDW discussion, I said, I try my best to think of every moment that I'm in as I have, as a choice, which is you can choose right now to be someone that needs support, or you can choose right now to be someone who can support. And that's something that I think about, especially at my job, being in a leadership position. Like, it's a pretty stressful job. That's something I think about the whole time there. And when I have a moment where I feel my ego getting the better of me, when I feel like this person doesn't like me, this person is offended that I said this person hates me because I had to criticize them about some work thing, I just remember that notion of I can choose right now to need support or to be the person who supports. And it kind of pulls me out of the situation and helps me unattach, I guess.
Yeah, I get that.
But I mean,
well, I noticed maybe I didn't emphasize this so much early on talking about Vipassana, but I notice that like the word vulnerability comes to mind, and in therapy that would be a more or less common piece of vocabulary. People talk about I'm really vulnerable in these situations, or it's time to get vulnerable in therapy.
Yeah,
and that's precisely the place to do it. But I recently have started to think about that in any way that we act mindlessly or automatically. I think about codependent anyone, right? We're all a little codependent, but you want to be a little receptive to that. You want to feel maybe a little guilty or a little questionable if you were to do something to upset somebody, or to be, if you were being awful to somebody. But I'm talking about really people who cannot function if there's something going on in their environment, if something makes them uncomfortable. What a vulnerability. Think about what you miss out on if you're busy thinking about this instead of that.
Yeah.
If you can't watch a whole 2-hour movie because somebody in your environment isn't feeling well,
Yeah.
or you made a democratic vote with your friends and you all decided, and the whole time you think, but does this person really want to be watching it?
Yeah.
These are things that people will say after the fact. And
For sure.
And I mean, we're already, if we're already obsessing about somebody else's mind, you never get around to you. So you are always going to be last in line, and not in that selfish, indulgent way that's like, do you know, always make always be comfortable. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about knowing your mind. Who are you? Is anything you do authentic? Is anything you do really you? And even if you say something that gets under my skin, or that rubs me the wrong way, or that I find to be tactless or thoughtless, I can tell you that too. But at least I know what you think.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather know what you think than not know what you think.
Gotcha. And you think the meditation is like one of the best ways to get to that place where you can learn yourself?
Well, yeah, you're completely vulnerable to you have to sit with you. You got to be friends with you. And I don't know if you experience this too, but people who are very critical of the rest of the world, I mean, if you were to unleash that watchdog on their own mind, on your own mind, I should say, it'd be amazing what you might find.
For sure.
And if you can pick apart your own eccentricities or idiosyncrasies, and if you can bug yourself as much as the world supposedly bugs you, you might find that you're not that pleasant either. Not that you're, I'm using the second person you, but anybody, right?
Yeah.
Me. I might find I'm not so great. I'm really bad at X, Y, and Z, and I'm really bad at being patient with me. I could stand to be a little more patient with other people.
Yeah, gotcha.
I know that when I cut somebody off because I missed my exit and it's completely harmless and I'm completely repentant about it, I don't give anyone that interpretation when they cut me off. I'm like, you're an asshole, and period, right? You're just a bad person. If I saw you at the store, I would shout you down and insult you, and we're just not that fair about that, you know?
Yeah, it's very true.
But anyway, coming full circle, I feel bad when I meet somebody who's so stuck interpreting. It's like they're living in a Jane Austen novel, and they're 50 steps ahead of everyone else because they're trying to. So they're pleasing and thank youing and providing, and I wonder, gosh, will I ever actually meet this person? Will I ever know what's going on upstairs? Will you ever show me who you are? Will you ever take a risk and let me make up my own mind?
Yeah,
that's the phrase that comes up a lot.
That's such a good, that's a good question, that what you were just asking. Will you ever show me yourself? And I have this question for you just to get your perspective on it. I 100% agree with you about learn to know yourself. Who are you? But it's a question that for myself, like we're trying to delve into it now, like how, even if someone started meditating every day, even if someone put aside that time and did the work, and did the practice, how can they objectively, when there's no one around to give them any support, any help, how can they know themselves? What if they continue the lie that they're telling to themselves about themselves? You know what I mean? Like how can you be objective with yourself? I feel like that's a great
question
to do.
So maybe it's a little late for me to be plugging this, but here's my expansion of, so I'm a therapist by trade. I'm a meditator just with my free time, personally. But these aren't things that have to exist just in isolation. I don't want to live in a world where I just meditate and then I go practice therapy and then I'm just a complete loser elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
Where I think of myself as just a loser in the rest of my life. Therapy it's so strange. It's almost like a profession that I wish didn't exist. Like I'd love to live in a world where everywhere is therapy, right? And not in that strict sense, but where, like, you can imagine if our families and our closest friends gave us that level of attention and compassion that we do get formally in therapy, but we got that in increments with everybody. or everyone on the street was just was being more like a therapist, and we could rely on other people to be. Yeah, it'd be very different, right? Similarly, meditation is just the paradigm. It's not.
Gotcha.
It's not this computer simulation that you're going to get plugged into. You could do it anytime. You can always check in with, what is this like to be me right now? So that's the question that if I have to go back to something, I ask myself that. What is this like, right? And so in a way, this was very freeing to figure out that you don't really have to be objective when you're meditating. You only have to be subjective, because you are stuck with you. You are always a subject in your world, right?
Very true.
So that wouldn't be the time to say, for example, is my cholesterol too high? And you just kind of think about it and you go, no, I don't think so, right? Not a good way to gauge cholesterol.
Gotcha.
Great way to gauge suffering, though. So if you can go back to your own head and go, okay, the only goal is just to sit here and notice what is true. And here you are with this story about how everyone's an asshole, and this guy was driving terribly yesterday, and my family member offended me, and he's so lame anyway. Now you have a story, and all of that are just reactions.
Yeah.
So what's really true, again, if you're going back to what's really true, you're just noticing what's really true is, I don't really like my uncle, and I think LA drivers suck. Well, those are opinions, and you might think, well, what is my reaction to those facts about myself?
Gotcha.
Do I hate myself when I'm thinking about hating other people? Wow, what an awful experience. What would it be like to just notice that my uncle and I are never going to see eye to eye, or maybe I'm never going to like being in traffic, and great. So do something with that. Move out of state, or just get back on the road and just know that that's exactly what it's going to be like.
Gotcha.
If you expected bumper to bumper traffic every day, then you would volunteer for that.
Yeah.
But so I hope that answers your question. But meditation and therapy might be something that a person never does, but they reap all the benefits from in other ways.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying.
Do you know what I mean?
I'm sure you probably think community, big thing to get involved in a community, have your friends, your family.
Yeah, that could be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, I mean, I do, so when I'm doing group therapy, most of the people in the group are not people who would volunteer to spend their time with each other on the street, so to speak.
Gotcha.
They wouldn't necessarily encounter each other. They probably never would have met ever, but they find themselves in this environment and it becomes a community.
Gotcha.
So anywhere where there's a common goal or interest or something like that, which I have also kind of through therapy and working with a lot of couples have been converted that you don't necessarily find the right person. You kind of create the right relationship. Not all sets of dyads are going to be perfectly compatible, but you enter a relationship with somebody, friend, romance, whatever, and you just kind of make it. You make it up as you go. And it can be as rewarding and as healthy as you want. And it can also suck.
Yeah.
And surely, I don't know what the answer is, but surely there's some amount of effort that you might want to put into a relationship where you would eventually cut yourself off and say, okay, I'm doing too much, or I'm just forcing something that's not going to work.
Yeah.
But you're never going to just get into that relationship and just coast and go, oh, good, I found it. Now I never have to do anything again. They're stuck with me.
One
after
true
all.
love doesn't exist, right?
You
don't have your soulmate.
You might have 800 true loves. You might, somewhere out there, right? You might have no one that's perfectly going to be that.
Yeah.
But again, dangerous in the way that you can be really disappointed.
Yeah.
To think that you just do it once, right? I found this person, I courted them, and I did it.
Yeah.
Now, done, right?
Gotcha.
I really worry about that. That's another responsibility meaning thing. How much meaning are you going to derive from a relationship where you've maybe explicitly thrown out all of your responsibility? So, like if you say, my responsibility was back there when I met you and I convinced you to like me, and now you're with me, right? 20 years later, you're like, what do you mean responsibility? You married me, till death do us part, right?
Yeah.
Yikes. That
not good, right?
Yeah, no. Those are couples I often worry about, where they don't imagine that they have anything else to do to continue to, I want to say court their partner, but kind of take care of their end of the bargain.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. Do you mind? Let's take a quick break, check
do
the
it.
time, get some coffee.
Sure. Yeah.